Hi, Tamal. Thanks for coming on the show again.
Thank you.
You've touched a raw nerve this time around with your column. You've given examples of harassment by bank officials. I have a one question regarding that. Why is it happening now?
No, it's not happening now. It's been all along there. And I think what has contributed to this, Ishan, is the concept of branch banking has changed because of technology. The everything like credit appraisal and KYC requirement, who to give credit, how much to give credit, everything is done in the back office. So the branches have become the sales office, and these guys are under pressure. There are two types of pressure. One is this, the cross selling, because if you look at the bank balance sheet every quarter when they announces the result, the kind of fee income they have, they call it other income. Other income has two component. One is treasury income, and one is the so-called fee income. So the higher the fee income, smarter the bank. So that fee income goads you to sell stuff, which many a time is exactly not appropriate. Like one example I set up, one gentleman was sold some 9 insurance policies worth 11 lakh
Yes.
plus premium every year, and these are sold for his grandchildren who were in US. The insurance entity says no, they are not valid. If anything happens, they will not get it done. So the relationship manager, who this gentleman trusted blindly, took advantage of that, and he must have got a good raise and bonus, etc. But he raised the fee income. So that's one. And second part is the target. You have certain targets, right? Now quarterly, your deposits have to be this much, your credit has to be this much, etc. So one example was there. Despite everything is in place, they release the savings bank account to the nominee, but not the FD, because FD was an FD was a hefty amount, and that was March end. They couldn't afford to release that money, so then that particular branch's liability, deposit liability, will come down. So they indeed they released it, but they did it in the second week of April. Now what happened to the hapless customer? That's a state account. This lady had to wait for 1 full year.
Got your point. Now, how well has the banking ombudsman performed in such cases? Is there a need to reform that system, you think?
I don't know. I think the banks need to reform themselves. Banking ombudsmen, if you see the number of incidents every year has been growing, and I would say it's a pretty efficient system. Recently I came across, there was a controversy with the public sector, with a large public sector bank, and banking's ombudsman settled it within 3 weeks. The money actually left somebody's account. The bank disowned it, and this gentleman approached the bank. It did not happen. Then he approached the ombudsman. Within 3 weeks, ombudsman settled it. It was 50-50, because the gentleman also had some, had to share some blame. Apparently, he shared the OTP with somebody, so it is not an inefficient system, but the banks need to do some soul searching. It's a very repressive financial system we have, because as I said, the credit to GDP ratio is so low, and everybody is not banked, so they take advantage of that. The banks are not sensitive. One of the way, I think today, if some bank has an USP, that customer service, it will do wonderfully well than others. And this is sector agnostic. This apathy to customers, exploiting the customers, taking advantage of the customers' ignorance, not showing the fine print, not explaining the fine print. This is across the sector. As one example I gave, one person had an FD, and he was forced to open a savings bank account as well. And that apparently the savings bank account had that some minimum balance you need to have. And when the FD matured, there's no interest. Actually, FD shrunk. And to his horror, the gentleman found that from his FD, every quarter the money flowed in the form of penalty. And he was never ever informed, either through SMS or through mail. So that's the multiple ways banks take advantage of the ignorance of customers.
Another area of complaint, and this has been a big area, has been the digital lending apps. RBI recently released rules in this regard. What do you make of that?
Well, it's a long discussion, but to cut a long story short, what RBI has made it clear to stop the misuse of that digital lending is that one leg has to be a regulated entity. So the responsibility lies with that regulated entity. That's very clear. If you are a non-bank, if you are neither a bank nor an NBFC, not regulated by RBI, you are in the space. But then you have to have a link with a bank. So the bank is responsible if anything goes wrong. There have been multiple cases of frauds, etc. So to stop that, one key takeaway from that, you can't be in digital business in isolation. One leg has to be with a regulated entity.
Got your point. Now, this week's column was interesting because it was written just before the Independence Day, right? And you talk about the history of banking, and then you talk about people falling outside the formal banking network and millions being unbanked. Now, one of the ideas with public sector banks was to take the banking to these people. Now, what more can be done to address these problems? Is branch opening a solution, or should we strengthen the banking correspondent network?
No, PMJDY is a great success, which the current government has launched. And this has actually changed the scenario dramatically. More and more people have come under the under the fold of banking. And all those government goodies, etc., now flow through the banks. So that's a good thing that happened. But despite that, I quoted a recent World Bank report, which says that India is one of the few countries which owns a large segment of unbanked. So which essentially boils down to that we need more banks. Certainly we need more banks, which is why RBI has done on-tap SFBs and universal banks, both are on-tap. It's another matter, there is not a single bank has come up. If you see historically, we got 10 banks in 1994. All of them did not survive. Then in 2004, we got two banks, which one of them got into trouble, Yes Bank. And then finally 2015, we got two more banks. So if you see, since economic liberalization, how many banks have come? Just 14 banks, and all of them not survived. Of course, then there are payments bank, and there are small finance banks, and there are local area banks, so on and so forth. But we need more banks, period. And we need also to reach out. I think, as you rightly said, that BC model, business correspondent model, is one way of doing it, because thanks to digital, the kind of stride we have made in the digital world, it's much easier than what it was now. So I think we are moving to that direction, but still it's quite a distance away from that.
So have PSPs failed their mandate of reaching to every customer?
Not exactly. If you see that the very fact that 1969, the first phase of nationalization happened, and subsequently yet another phase. So they have done their job. Certainly they have done their job, but it's too much to expect from them. If you talk to any public sector banks, they will get into a nostalgia trip that we have built bridges, we have built roads, we have reached out to people, so on and so forth. And it's very true. But the fact is, you can't have the cake and eat it too. I mean, either you treat them as a business entity, or you treat them as a socio-economic vehicle for socio-economic upliftment. So we are confused on that. They are listed entities. We want them to take care of their balance sheets, the ROA and ROE, how their growth. At the same time, we want them to do everything else, which the private banks do not do. Look at the PMJDY numbers. The public sector banks are far ahead. Even during the COVID, the government scheme where the money was given with a government guarantee. Again, look at the number. Public sector banks are far ahead. So it will be unfair to say that public sector banks have not fulfilled their mission, but I think they are suffering from an identity crisis. Are they business entities, or are they a vehicle for socio-economic changes?
Got your point. Thank you. Thanks a lot for your time this week. We hope to see you next week. Thanks again.
Thanks.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.
I am the blue of the limitless sky. I am the inspiration that led success soar high. I will achieve, I will fly high. I am the I in SBI.
I'm backed by the nation's trusted bank, SBI, the banker to every Indian.